I do vaguely remember the Airbnb actually too. But I don't remember you talking about Bloodsport, to be honest.
So you've blocked out the important details of the evening, I see.
Yeah. It was too much. I wasn't ready for it.
Yeah. Welcome to I'd Buy That for $1, a podcast about inexpensive, common, and underappreciated records that are waiting to be rediscovered. I'm your host, Sean Hartman, retired seaman and amateur walrus enthusiast.
Tusk.
You got it.
Like Fleetwood Mac?
Kind of.
The song did appear in that film.
Good enough for me. Well, I'm co-host Jeremy. And I just brought you boys some English caramels today.
Oh, well, that's nice of you.
Especially since we're doing this remote.
Yeah. I'm shipping one each to you.
That's very nice of you.
Thanks. I'm a nice guy.
That's what I always say about Jeremy Ruggles. Nice guy. I'm co-host Peter Cook, president of the Earl McGraw Appreciation Society.
Oh, how do I join that society?
Just talk to me afterwards. I'll get you set up.
All right, deal. You know, Peter, I would personally describe you as a terrific podcaster in a lot of ways, but weird.
Well, okay. I think that makes a terrific podcaster, so that all goes together.
All right, just want to get that out there.
I think I just said the other day that when I describe Peter to people, I say he's normal.
Yeah.
That was the beginning and end of it?
Yeah.
Oh, Peter, he's my normal friend.
Yes.
The guy that does the normal things.
There was not an ounce of sarcasm either.
Yeah, I think you said that after I criticized someone for being weird.
Sure.
And then I self-reflected and said, unlike me. And that was your response.
Well, we're giving the people what they want. A review of our text messaging.
Yeah. Yeah, people want that peek behind the curtain, our messaging in our private chat that we have connected to the podcast.
Personally, I think people want us to talk about music. Maybe a underappreciated record.
What about actors?
Yeah, they do. Well, I don't know if they like it when we talk about actors occasionally, but we have been doing that every once in a while.
Why not both?
Why not both? Maybe we could talk about the great Michael Parks.
Yeah. It's about time.
It is about time. Before we talk about him, though, let's hear a song. I'm going to play you guys a track called Yonder Comes the Blues.
And what album is this off of? And what year did it come out?
Oh, those are also good questions. This is off Michael Parks' album Long, Lonesome Highway on MGM Records from the year 1970.
Perfect. Let's hear it.
Side A, track 3, Yonder Comes the Blues.
Raindrops falling on a roof of tin. All bad news. The roof keeps leaking and that rain pours in. Well, I guess I'm paying my dues. You'd better look over yonder now and tell me, what do you see? Yonder come the blues running after me. Well, it keeps on raining all of the time, sometimes out but mostly in. And I've been waiting for that sun to shine, oh Lord, since I can't recall when. You'd better look over yonder now what you see. Yonder come the blues running after me.
That song is probably the most jagged of the record, and it's still so smooth.
Yeah, it's got that nice honky-tonk vibe with just a touch of psychedelic.
I noticed that the bulk of the songs on this album were written by a guy named James Hendricks, or Jim Hendricks, not to be confused with Jimi Hendrix.
Yes.
But that one was written by Fred Neil.
Correct. I also have a note of this.
I thought you might.
Yeah. I wasn't very familiar with Fred's music from, his recordings of it. He's a guy who's more popular as a songwriter. I went through and listened to a handful of his tracks, including the original of that song, and he's great. He's a really, really good folk musician. I'm interested to hear more stuff by him. But Peter, would you like to tell people the song that everyone knows by Fred Neil?
Yeah, he wrote Everybody's Talkin', which is best known for the Harry Nilsson recording.
Right, from the Midnight Cowboy soundtrack.
Yeah, I mainly associate him with that, too. I can't say I've spent a ton of time with his originals.
Yeah. I was sitting there listening to him, and I was like, man, this is a guy Jeremy would like. Fred Neil.
Yeah, Fred Neil strikes me as a Jeremy guy. Has he yet become a Jeremy guy, Jeremy?
No, he hasn't been on my radar, so I'll have to check it out.
All right, well, that's your official homework for this episode.
Check out Fred Neil. Check.
But back to Michael Parks.
Yeah, back to Michael Parks. What do you guys know about Michael Parks? Jeremy, let's start with you.
Everything I know about Michael Parks mostly comes from an interview with Kevin Smith, because I was like, I want to learn about Michael Parks, but I want to hear swearing every third word for no reason.
You thought to yourself, I fucking want to learn about fucking Michael Parks,
Yeah. Once I saw a picture of him, I was like, oh yeah, that guy. I've seen him and stuff.
Yeah, he's been around.
Yeah, but I'm totally unfamiliar with his music before this. Wouldn't know what is like, yeah, wouldn't be able to identify him.
Yeah, I first became familiar with him, obviously, as an actor, as I'm sure many people our age have, because he was in Kevin Smith films, Quentin Tarantino films, Robert Rodriguez films. I first saw him in From Dusk Till Dawn, playing the character of Earl McGraw, which would become a recurring character in the Tarantino world. And he's just absolutely riveting as an actor. And From Dusk Till Dawn, he's only in the first maybe 10 minutes of the film, but you think it's setting it up almost like it's going to be his film. And then
yeah, well, by the end of the movie, you are desperately wishing that it had been his film.
That's true. Yeah. And he's just always delivers whenever I see him in anything. I just recently watched the first 2 seasons of Twin Peaks, and he's only in a handful of episodes of the original run of Twin Peaks, but as soon as he's on screen, you're all in.
There's something about his on-screen presence that is just like so watchable. You can't look away. And he's been in so many movies and projects that are generally bad, aside from every moment that he's on screen. It's fascinating. What a talent.
That story that Kevin Smith told when he and Tarantino and Michael Parks were hanging out, and Tarantino got out an old VHS that was like a greatest hits of Michael Parks, not musically, but his acting that he had just recorded off of TV over the years and then compiled together into a compilation of all the times that he came in and made the movie or show worth watching for his duration of being on screen. That was fascinating.
Yeah, very cool story.
But yeah, I had no idea that he had been a musician until I was working with you in the record store, Sean, and we were going through the bins, figuring out all what we had. And we had a copy of his first album, which the name is now escaping me, even though I asked you right before we started what that was called.
That would be 1969's Closing the Gap.
Yes, thank you. I remember we had that one, and I checked it out and was like, this is really good. But I never really dug in further after that. I just was like, well, this guy can seemingly do anything that he tries his hand at. I'm glad we've now decided to do this record, because it's been great spending more time with his music. It's almost hard for me to comprehend it's the same guy that I know from those Tarantino and Kevin Smith films.
Yeah, the image that people have of him from his late career is very different from the public image that he had in the late 60s, early 70s, which we'll get into more. But I mean, for a minute in the mid to late 60s, he was one of the hottest rising stars in Hollywood. Many people were saying, like, this is the next big thing. This is like the next James Dean. Like, he was a big rising star.
Sean, what led you to Michael Parks? How did you find this record? Well, we know how you found it, but...
Yeah, I had kind of a roundabout way of getting into Michael Parks, as happens sometimes. I had forgotten about finding him with Peter in the Record Store Project. I mean, we were going through so many albums at the time that some of them stood out and some of them slipped through the cracks, and this was one of them. I'd obviously seen a bunch of movies that he was in, especially being a teenager getting into movies and obviously being obsessed with Tarantino and Kevin Smith, as many other young men of that age were. So yeah, I'd seen him a bunch, but didn't necessarily know him by name. And then over the past few years, I've been getting more into country music, and especially this kind of interesting countercultural, like cosmic country stuff that was happening right around this time. And I was looking through lists of this stuff a few years ago. That's where I found like the Robert Thomas Verlaine album that we covered before.
Bobby V.
Yeah, Bobby V. And this Michael Parks album was on some lists, and I was like, wow, that guy looks so cool. Dressed all cool. He's got that cool red motorcycle. The album's called Long Lonesome Highway. Like, this has got to be good. Listened to a little bit online, was so into it, picked it up, and yeah, I've had this one on kind of the back burner of great albums we could talk about. And then Peter reminded me, that guy's an actor and he's been in a bunch of movies that you like. And yeah, it's been fun preparing for this episode and officially becoming a diehard Michael Parks fan, both the music and the movies.
I thought the cover of this record, beyond him looking cool and being on a cool motorcycle, there's a very prominent Illuminati sticker on the motorcycle. I found that pretty interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, I wonder what that's all about.
Ooh, I hadn't looked that closely yet. I already ordered myself a copy since they're like $1.50. This is another true bargain bin record right here.
Yeah, we're not testing the limits with this one.
No. And so I'll look more closely when I have a nice big physical copy in front of me. That would be the thing that you would notice, Jeremy.
Touche.
Well, yeah, we'll listen to another song in a minute and then get into the life story, but just want to kind of paint a brief picture here. This is one of those like legendary Hollywood guys who has so many stories about him and claims of people he was friends with and things that he did, and it's kind of hard to prove or disprove a lot of it, but it's just one of those interesting figures with like a very well-lived life with many, I'm sure, wild experiences that we may never, ever hear about. Just like a few of the things that people say about him: supposedly one of Johnny Cash's best friends. He was one of Lenny Bruce's pallbearers. He would hang out with Elvis, friends with Martin Luther King Jr., supposedly jammed with Miles Davis once. The man did everything.
Yeah, that's what Kevin Smith was saying about hanging out with him.
Yeah, endless stories.
Like he would say something, he'd be telling a story about his friend Martin, and Kevin Smith would say, "Oh, Martin Sheen? No, Martin Luther King."
Yeah.
Well, I look forward to learning more, but let's listen to another song.
Let's do that. We're going to play one of the slower numbers from this album, a track called Summer Days. This is one of multiple songs that was featured on the TV show Then Came Bronson, which we will talk about more later on. But here's Summer Days, side A, track 6.
How I love the summertime, lazy evenings, sparkling wine, drowsy morning, sleepy head. Don't you think it's time to get out of bed? The morning sun will catch you dreaming. I remember my childhood days, sunburned faces, careless ways, weeping willow, new fishing pole. Tomorrow I'll meet you at the old swimming hole, living life the easy way. Summer days, summer evenings, filled with reminiscent feelings that warm your heart. July blue skies, children's laughter, chasing moonbeams, running after rainbows.
That song is a good reminder of a thought I had while previewing this album. This is a record that I could see becoming a comfort record for me. Something, and as I said, I already ordered a copy. I could see this being something that I will just put on when I want to mellow out, kick back, and just kind of feel okay, vibe out, as the youngsters may say.
Yeah, and it's a very consistent album. For me, there's really only one track that I'll sometimes skip. That's Re-Enlistment Blues. But everything else is very strong on it. It was tough picking 4 tracks for this one.
Yeah, and Re-Enlistment Blues isn't, I don't think it's a bad track. It's just, it breaks the mood.
Yeah, it's also twice as long as everything else on the album, so it kind of just seems as like a weird outlier a little bit, but it's certainly not a bad song.
Yeah.
It reminded me a little, he's pretty consistently gentle throughout the album, but the way he's able to emote within the words kind of got me thinking about Richard Harris that we'd covered previously.
Yeah, another actor, sometimes singer.
Yep.
Yeah, the way it feels like actors are really good at, who'd have thunk, they're really good at being expressive with their singing.
Yeah. I consider Michael Parks a great singer, but he's definitely not a great singer in the traditional sense. He's a very expressive, very emotional singer, and I think it fits the material perfectly.
Yeah, I don't always have a really solid sense of whether or not someone is a good traditional singer. I tend to gravitate towards unconventional voices.
Yeah, I think we all do. That's been fairly established by this point on the podcast.
Yeah. And so to me, I just listen to this and I'm like, wow, he's really good. He moves me. So that's all that matters.
That's all that ever really matters for me. So here we are.
Yeah. I've had the revelation that not everyone thinks the Roaches' voices are just the most heavenly thing in the world, and that's hard for me to fathom.
Yeah, that just doesn't make sense.
Low IQ take.
I also love that song Summer Days because the lyrics are pretty happy. Lots of like nice imagery, fun things, sunshine, taking it easy, but the arrangement and the music and the delivery is just like dark and dreamy and melancholy and kind of strange and sad.
Yeah, something about that song in particular, it's just like it's putting a spell on you as the listener.
Mm-hmm.
You get whisked away.
Well, do you guys want to learn more about the great Michael Parks and how this album came about, why it's so cheap, why more people don't know him as the great singer?
I would like all those questions answered, please.
All right, I'm on it. Here we go. Let's maybe start at the beginning. Michael Parks was born Harry Samuel Parks on April 24th, 1940 in Corona, California. As a teenager, he worked odd jobs, including picking fruit, digging ditches, driving trucks, and fighting forest fires.
I thought this was going to turn into a Rod McEwen job list.
Yeah, while everyone else was out there singing in church, Michael Parks was fighting forest fires.
It's a little different origin story.
Slightly, yep. Michael was married several times throughout his life. His first wife, he married at the age of 16 in 1956. That marriage lasted only 2 years, and they had a daughter together. Around 1960, around the age of 20, he moved to Hollywood and began working under the name Michael Parks. His first role was in a 1961 episode of a show called Dick Powell's Zane Grey Theater. From there, he started landing small roles in shows like Gunsmoke, The Alfred Hitchcock Hour, Perry Mason, 77 Sunset Strip, and Route 66.
Oh, he was all over television.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, all the big shows and many, many more. His second marriage was to actress Jan Moriarty in 1964. This was kind of a tragic marriage. It only lasted a few months, ending with Jan's apparent suicide by overdose.
Jesus.
Yeah, pretty heavy. In 1965, he made his film debut in a movie called Wild Seed. He was cast after Marlon Brando was considered too old for the part. So again, that's just like kind of a glimpse of like how he was being positioned in Hollywood at the time. Like this is the new hot young leading man.
Yeah, for sure.
Who's talented as well. He continued acting in a handful of movies in the late 1960s, including John Huston's The Bible in 1966. He played Adam. He was also in the countercultural movie The Happening in 1967. His third marriage was in 1968 to a woman named Carolyn Carson. That one lasted a little longer. They were together until 1977, and together they had a son named James, who went on to be an actor as well. He acted alongside his dad in a handful of movies, actually.
Yeah, including some Tarantino films.
Yep, and Kevin Smith's Red State, and yeah, handful. In 1969, Parks is riding this continuing and growing wave of success, and he gets cast in the leading role in the NBC adventure drama show Then Came Bronson. Were either of you guys familiar with this show by any chance ahead of this episode?
No, but it seems that it was a big deal at the time. I saw that Bonnie Bedelia was the co-star in at least the pilot. She's probably best known for as Holly McClane in the Die Hard films. John McClane's wife, Bruce Willis's character's wife.
Right, and Martin Sheen was in the first episode of that show as well.
Okay. Makes all the more sense that when when Michael Parks is telling a story about someone named Martin, you might think Martin Sheen, not Martin Luther King.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, this was not a show I was really that familiar with, but the more I dug into it, the more it was clear that, like, this was a very culturally important show at the time, and also is very directly tied to his short-lived music career from around this time. So I wanted to spend just like a little bit more time painting the picture of like what the cultural image was and what this show was like. So Then Came Bronson, what only lasted one season, by the way, but Michael Parks played this kind of wandering pacifist rebel riding his iconic red Harley Davidson motorcycle. It was kind of like a Western theme where the beginning episode, his best friend Martin Sheen dies, and he just kind of affects him so much that he decides to give up the rat race and just kind of travel the country on a motorcycle. So every episode he kind of like rolls into a different small town and then ends up like solving a conflict, being a catalyst for change, helping people. So it was like this kind of gritty, real drama, kind of like an intellectual drama, but he had this sort of image as like part tough guy, rebel, wanderer, but also like pacifist, intellectual, sensitive. There was a lot of like country and folk music on the soundtrack on there. So yeah, that's kind of where we're at with the whole Michael Parks late 60s, Then Came Bronson vibe. The show drew many comparisons to Easy Rider.
That's exactly where my brain was going. This sounds like, I don't know if it came in the wake of Easy Rider or that was just sort of the wavelength that people were on then.
Well, interestingly enough, a lot of people kind of accused the show of ripping off Easy Rider. However, the show was technically first. The pilot episode was a film length that was debuted at film festivals, and that actually debuted a few months before Easy Rider did. So even though Easy Rider was out and a big part of the culture before people were seeing the full show broadcast on television, it was technically first.
Then Came Bronson.
Then Came Bronson. Yeah, so it kind of a blip in pop culture of the time, but for some people this was a really big deal. I mean, for some, Bronson was viewed as a sort of major counterculture icon, and Michael Parks by association. The closing credit theme was the title track from this album, Long, Lonesome Highway, as sung by Michael Parks.
Yeah, so this album is kind of riding that hype.
Exactly.
Do you get the sense he's like doing a character for this album? Or is he just kind of like the character he's playing in the show is kind of like him?
I think the character is fairly close to him. I saw some reports that he had like a huge amount of creative control on the series, like more than an actor normally would. I couldn't necessarily confirm that, but it definitely felt like for him, this was like a very self-representative project. He may have not been quite as like peaceful and gentle in real life as the character was, but it seemed in some ways pretty close to him in real life. But, you know, that's also hard for me to say.
You didn't hang out with him getting high watching Red Skate.
I can't make completely accurate guesses on that.
Yeah.
We'll ask Quentin next time. See if he has any.
Yeah, next time we see him. Yeah.
Yeah. About half an hour before we started recording here, I messaged Sean, are you sure you don't want to do a Hail Mary ask of Quentin Tarantino or Kevin Smith to come on last minute as our guest, since they're such diehard Michael Parks fans?
Yeah, they do it for Michael, I think.
If they're out there, come on, we'll talk about another record of his.
Yeah, we'll talk Michael Parks Blue. We'll talk Closing the Gap. Bring it on. So yeah, as I said, the short-lived music career was very tied to this show. He actually only released 4 major label albums, and all of those were pretty much within a year of each other, between 1969 and 1970, which is when the show Then Came Bronson aired. Despite being well rated, the show was canceled after only one season. Supposedly he clashed with the producers over the issue of they wanted to take the second season into a more violent action-packed direction, and Parks was putting his foot down and making a lot of public statements saying that he was against that, and they decided to just go ahead and cancel the show and get rid of him. Later on, Parks also said that he could be rather difficult on set, so, you know, who knows where the blame was really to be found in all of that.
It seems like something that it had its brief moment. I don't know that it had longevity to it. Not that I've seen it, but were you able to watch episodes of it, Sean?
Yeah, there's a couple episodes you can find on YouTube. I didn't watch a complete one, but I kind of skimmed through a little bit to sort of get the vibe. It looks cool. I kind of want to go through a whole episode, maybe see if I like it. I know there's some people that really love this show. They are diehard fans to this day. Just one example, Mystery Science Theater writer Frank Conniff is a huge fan and would often write in references to Them Came Bronson into MST3K episodes. Basically, anytime you saw someone, you know, a lone figure riding a motorcycle, they would try and make a Then Came Bronson reference.
Well, I shouldn't pass judgment on it, but without having seen it.
Yeah, could be your new favorite thing.
But it seemed it made its mark regardless of how long it was on.
All right, well, before we finish the bio, let's go ahead and hear that title track from the show, Long, Lonesome Highway.
Let's.
All right.
This is Side B, Track 1.
Going down that long, lonesome highway, bound for the mountains and the plains. Sure ain't nothing here gonna tie me, and I got some friends I'd like to see again. One of these days I'm gonna settle down, but till I do, I won't be hanging round. Going down that long, lonesome highway, gonna live life my way. One of these days I'm gonna settle down, but till I do, I won't be hanging around. Going down that long.
You got more of that great hazy country light psych vibe going on there right from the cool reverb sounds on the guitar right from the beginning. It's just a great track. You just kind of lose yourself in it. Sit back and relax.
New comfort album.
Yeah, I really like the guitar playing on that. Do we know who the other players were on here?
Oh, we do. And I'm going to tell you more about them just a little bit later.
Fine, I'll wait.
Yeah, please do. Stick around, Jeremy.
Okay.
Better. He's the one recording this.
Yeah, he better. You know, that song reminds me a lot of another musician who liked to ride a red motorcycle sometimes. You guys get any Bob Dylan vibes off that track? Maybe a little Nashville Skyline?
Oh, yeah. Which would have been right before this, or right. I guess the song, it sounds like, was right around 1969, probably, if it was in that show.
Yeah, right around the same time as that. Definitely similar styles, similar influences.
Yeah, right. Yeah, right down to his vocal styling. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And also two people that kept Johnny Cash close by. I think you sent a performance of Michael Parks on the Johnny Cash show to us.
Yep, that came out right around the same time. He also did an appearance on the Ed Sullivan show around that same time. The performance is great, and then I was hoping for like maybe a bit of a Michael Parks interview after that, and Ed Sullivan just kind of walks up and was like, "So, Michael Parks, how's the weather where you're from? See you later." Like, all right, cool, thanks, buddy.
Oh, I don't. Yeah, who knows what he would have gotten out of him if he had tried.
Yeah, Ed was just slightly past his prime at that point, I think.
Uh,
But yeah, the performance from the Johnny Cash show is really cool. They do a duet together, and there's this cool footage over the opening song of them just like goofing around in a field, riding a motorcycle together. It's great.
mm-hmm.
It seemed like a genuine, wonderful friendship. I'm sure they got into quite the antics back in the day.
No doubt.
Yeah. Well, let me pick up the story where we left off and finish it off real quick. So, Michael Parks was unofficially blacklisted from Hollywood after the cancellation of Then Came Bronson. He didn't get any major parts in movies or TV for about 3 years, and he never again released another major label album. Supposedly, during those first few years off, he was trying to qualify for the 1972 Olympics as a long-distance runner, but failed to qualify.
Oh, wow. Apparently something he's only good enough to attempt.
Yeah. I think that still qualifies him for our team of all-stars that we're assembling, though.
Yeah. I mean, this man, like I said, he can do anything he tries his hand at. He excels.
Do we know why he was blacklisted?
Well, I'm about to maybe shed just a little bit more light on that.
Oh, good.
The claim is that it was just the disagreement over the show direction and him being generally uncompromising and difficult to work with. However, so his return to film was in a Canadian movie called Between Friends in 1973. He had to go to a whole different country to get work again. And the director of that movie was a guy named Donald Shabib, who said later in an interview that Parks was loudly anti-Semitic and incredibly difficult to work with on set. And I think maybe that had something to do with the blacklisting.
That would make sense.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know how much of it was like in response to being pissed off at his situation and how much of it was he was doing that all along and you can't do that in Hollywood.
Yeah.
And shouldn't do that anywhere.
Now I don't know what to think of the guy.
I know, right? A complicated man, if nothing else, I guess. So he gradually returns to work in American film and television, but is primarily cast in small, low-budget parts. At times in the 70s and 80s, him and his son James were living out of a car. And then he has his late career resurgence that we mentioned before. In 1991, he gets cast as Jean Reno in 5 episodes of the greatest television show of all time, Twin Peaks.
Yeah, Sean is one of the... I mean, Twin Peaks has some serious fandom, but among the people I know into it, you have, especially the last several years, you've ascended to the top of that pile.
It's my new thing.
You got me to get through season 2.
Finally, yeah.
It took years of trying.
Yeah, I'm just eagerly waiting for you to give me a report on your initial impressions of The Return.
Yeah, I will. I'm taking a little break, and then I will rewatch Fire Walk with Me, which I have seen a few times, and then I will shortly thereafter get into The Return, and then the podcast is just going to become a Twin Peaks podcast at that point.
I'm so ready for it.
Oh, goody.
Interesting bit of trivia here. Michael Parks apparently was eventually got on much better terms with Canadian director Donald Shabib and reached out to him while working on his role for Twin Peaks to help him brush up on his French-Canadian accent.
Yeah, he does a very convincing accent on Twin Peaks.
Yeah, and in part because of his Hollywood exile, I guess. Interesting coincidences there.
Yeah, the man is fascinating, if nothing else.
True. In 1996, as we said, he had a small but memorable part in Robert Rodriguez's film From Dusk Till Dawn. From there, Quentin Tarantino cast him in Kill Bill 1 and 2, playing two different characters. He's also in Grindhouse, Django Unchained, and many, many other movies. Kevin Smith, who actually first saw him when he went and saw the movie From Dusk Till Dawn, cast him in two of his later movies, Red State and Tusk, which I referenced in my intro. Tusk is it's a movie. It's a whole movie. It is unsettling to say the least. And I suppose people should go watch it if you want something a little different.
If you like cringy body horror.
Yeah. Michael Parks is great in it. And the thing learned from listening to that Kevin Smith interview, Tusk was right after Michael Parks had a stroke and was rather debilitated and like not cognitively all there, and seemed like maybe that was it for his career. But he was so interested in working with Kevin Smith again that he agreed to push through and work on Tusk. And they were saying that him being in that film and having to push through to memorize dialogue and being around people like regained his speech and cognitive abilities through the effort that he put into the movie, which is just fascinating to me.
Yeah, that was a pretty powerful story that Kevin Smith told in the aforementioned interview. You had told us that you watched, before we started recording, you said that you had just watched Red State. Was that the first time that you had seen Red State, Sean?
That is the first time that I'd seen it, yeah.
How did you feel about it?
I like the movie. I have some mixed feelings about some of the acting performances and just like general plot and direction of it. But the one thing I left the movie utterly convinced of is that Michael Parks was just like firing on all cylinders and lights up the screen every time you see him. Mm-hmm. He's just like embarrassingly better at acting than almost everyone else in the movie. He's kind of even outdoing John Goodman, who's one of my favorites.
Well, I was going to say that John Goodman and him, that final scene at the climax of the film with the two of them, that's a standout moment in that picture.
And the final joke of the movie, probably the only time where I actually laughed in the movie, was not written by Kevin Smith. It was a Michael Parks idea.
Yes. I don't know how much detail we can go into that to get it across.
We'll just leave that for people. Go watch Red State and admire the great Michael Parks.
Yeah. I've seen Red State twice now, and it's worth it alone for Parks' performance. It's an interesting experiment for Kevin Smith, but it was an absolute showcase for Michael Parks.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, Michael Parks, he died on May 19th, 2017 at the age of 77.
Yeah, it feels like he with his late acting career revival, it seems like he really had more in him. It's too bad, but I'm grateful that it's someone that was watching movies as he was having that career resurgence. I'm grateful to have gotten to experience that and kind of watch it happen in real time over the last 15, 20 years of his life.
Yeah, you see some of those performances from throughout his career, you can definitely understand the argument of like, this guy should have been a household name and had the talent to be one of our biggest stars, but didn't end up that way.
I think a lot of people who know him don't even know he made music.
Yeah, exactly. It's an even more hidden part of his overlooked career. Well, Jeremy, you wanted to know about the players on this album. I think it's a good time to enlighten you on that. Are you ready?
I'm ready. I've been waiting this whole time.
Here we go. Well, we mentioned guitarist and multi-instrumentalist Jim Hendrix before. He's playing acoustic guitar on this album, and he wrote 7 out of the 10 songs here. He also produced all 3 of Michael's MGM albums. And just a few years before this album, Jim was a member of a band called the Mugwumps, along with future members of the Mamas and the Papas and the Lovin' Spoonful.
Okay.
On bass, you got Jerry Scheff. He played on a bunch of great albums, including The Doors' L.A. Woman. He played on the Buckingham Nicks album. He played on Bob Dylan's Street Legal. And then he played on every single John Denver album from the 80s and the 90s, including John Denver and the Muppets' Rocky Mountain Holiday.
Classic.
On piano, you got Michael Rubini. He also arranged the string and horn sections on this album, which I love. This same year, he played on Phil Ochs' Greatest Hits.
Previously featured on I'd Buy That for $1.
Yes, sir.
A very long time ago.
Yeah.
Hundreds of episodes ago. On drums, you got Ronnie Tutt. At this point, Ronnie was a member of Elvis Presley's touring band, and he also played on both Graham Parsons' solo albums and also Kenny Rankin's Silver Morning.
That all super tracks.
Yeah, for sure. And then on electric guitar and dobro, we have the legendary James Burton, an official Wrecking Crew member, early rock and roll pioneer. He played on Dale Hawkins' original Susie Q. He played on a bunch of early Ricky Nelson songs, and he also played on Phil Ochs' Greatest Hits and both Graham Parsons' solo albums, plus somewhere around a million other albums, I think is the official count.
Yeah, well, that tracks, as you said, that cosmic American music sound that this album has.
Yeah, it's a stacked cast of players on here for sure. Like, no slouches on this one. It definitely makes you understand why it's such a compelling listen and such a consistent listen all the way through.
Fantastic. Now, let's say they didn't get enough consistency here. They need more albums, Sean. Are you the guy to give it to them?
I might be able to do that. Let me give it an honest attempt here. 2 albums that we featured before. Robert Thomas Verleen, aka Bobby V, Nothing Like a Sunny Day from 1972. That's the first album I think of in comparing these two, and it was a great episode. Check out that album, listen to the episode.
You know, now that I'm familiar with that album, sometimes I'll get songs from it stuck in my head, and I think that they're like classic songs I know from the radio, and I'll spend 10 minutes going through my head trying to figure out what it is, maybe punch in some lyrics, and then I realize it's Robert Thomas Verleen, an album that nobody knows about.
An album that many people should know about, though. Lost classic.
Go listen to the episode and then listen to the album.
All right, another favorite album of mine that I believe Jeremy hosted the episode on, Jonathan Edwards, Honky Tonk Stardust Cowboy, 1972.
Oh yeah, that's right in that vein too.
Mm-hmm.
A little cosmic, pretty chill, almost folky at times.
Yeah. Final recommendation, a guy that I've seen around but wasn't super familiar with, but after digging around on some of his albums from this time, I was pretty blown away, and I'm going to be picking these up soon because they're cheap and plentiful. I'm talking about Tom Rush and his self-titled album from 1970. Are either of you guys familiar with Tom Rush?
I know his name. I offhand, I can't say what he does. I've seen the name a million times.
All right, well, Peter, that's your homework. Listen to Tom Rush. Jeremy, listen to Fred Neil, and report back.
Deal.
Okay, will do.
All right, perfect. I'm just going to assign homework more often on these episodes. It's fun.
Another new idea.
Yeah. I'm going to call you on it, too. I'm going to keep bringing it up until you guys actually listen to these people.
They never follow up on it on an episode.
No, it's going to happen. This is my new thing. Get ready. Every episode.
All right, teach.
Well, that's it for me. Do you guys have final thoughts? Maybe you want to hear one final song that we could go out on? I don't know. What do you want to do?
Well, first of all, I want to remind our listeners that you can support the podcast over at Patreon, patreon.com/I'dBuyThatPodcast. We have both the $1 and the $5 tier. The $1 tier is early access to episodes. You'll get them a little in advance of everyone else, so you can be the coolest kid in class talking about what everyone else is going to hear, and I'd buy that for $1. Come Mondays when they're They're just itching for that Tuesday drop. And the $5 tier will get you that early access as well as bonus episodes. We do them on 45s traditionally when Sean's not breaking the rules.
You know I love doing that.
Yeah. Talk about 45s. And that is the extent of our Patreon now. You can support us again over at patreon.com/I'd Buy That Podcast. Sign up today.
Sean, for the last song, can we listen to the best song on the album?
I think we can definitely do that, assuming you're talking about My Melancholy Baby.
Yeah, I want it to be even gentler than the other songs we've heard and maybe a little jazzy.
This song reminds me just a little bit of previously featured Lewis. You guys pick up on that just a little bit on this album?
I try not to think about Lewis all the time, but now that you mentioned that, I could hear that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, they're different time periods. There's no synthesizers on this album, but a little bit of that same sense of longing and raw, vulnerable emotion going on.
This was my favorite song, too, when listening to the record. I mean, it's a standard, right?
Yeah, the song was first published in 1912 and was a standard amongst pop vocalists and jazz musicians. It's a song that on paper shouldn't work on this album. Like, you're telling me he's doing a mostly light psych country folk album, but there's also one pop jazz standard on it. But somehow he just crushes this song. I listened to a handful of other versions and I couldn't find anything that even came close to Michael's version on this album. I agree. This is surprisingly the best song on the album.
I think we all agree. We'll go out on that song. Thank you, listeners, for tuning in to another installment of I'd Buy That for $1. Go watch some Michael Parks performances. Check out his records. My name is Peter Cook.
My name's Jeremy Ruggles.
I'm Sean Hartman, and here's My Melancholy Baby, Side B, Track 2.
Come, sweetheart mine, don't sit and pine. Tell me all about the things that make you blue. Answer me, what have I done? I could never say an unkind word to you. Come to me, my melancholy don't feel blue. All your fears are foolish fancies. Maybe you know